I have now created 3 startups, and managing those personal dynamics is very essential for survival. Once the PhD is done, then the student does not care about that project any further. Similarly, once the paper is published, probably, or the grant is completed, the professor also probably doesn't care about. So that's why the projects get born. They you know survive for some time or grow for some time, and after that they die. The reason for the death is finally the co-founders are unable to work with each other.
No, in our college also, when there are some projects, there are a few startups which have been started with some professors guide. I guess we have one startup in my year student only, my colleague only. He is doing some biomedical startup right now. He's making a device. So for that, he has been collaborating with, I guess, 3 to 4 professors and helping them. So it's really great to see that, okay, in institutions now in engineering, because you also know that engineering college में engineering बहुत कम लोग करते हैं, right? They want to explore more. So it's really great to see that, okay, professors apart from teaching are also being involved into research and doing startups with their students. Now, because you have done it, right? How is it to be a professor and start off as a co-founder with your student, right? What is something? How is the equation set between the two?
Yeah, so that because ये एक learning process मेरे लिए भी था. Means when I started, I even didn't know. Say 3 years back, I didn't know how a company is formed, how the equities are shared, what is shareholders' rights and all those things. So once we started doing it, then initially we got a grant. Then for the fulfillment of grant, we needed to float a company. So I started with my co-founder, my PhD student, and then what happens is there are many dynamics, and especially those personal dynamics are very important for the survival of the startup. I have now created 3 startups, and managing those personal dynamics is very essential for survival of the startup, because most startups die. Those startups which die, most startups, the reason for the death is finally the co-founders are unable to work with each other. They fight with each other, or one person says like, okay, this is my product vision, other person says no, this is my product vision, and there is a conflict, and वो बोलता है मेरी बात ये नहीं सुनता उसकी, and धीरे धीरे वो क्या होता है, then that startup breaks. So the top reason for any startup to die is that actually.
Actually, the statistics is right that there's 90% the startups which fail, out of them 90% fail because the issue between co-founders. There's actually a survey done by some like New York Times or some news.
So ये शादी करने जैसा ही है. So it's almost like that. So because now the dynamics changes. Like earlier, if you are a professor student, you could probably order the student. Okay, you do like this, and then the student, even if unwillingly, you'll probably do that. And another thing is the student many times feel when it is not a startup, because for example प्रोफेसर का एक प्रोजेक्ट है, उसका एक रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट है, एंड देन प्रोफेसर प्रोबेबली एज कि चलो मेरे पेपर्स आएंगे तो देन मेरा प्रमोशन होगा एंड ऑल दोस थिंग्स आर देयर. स्टूडेंट का है कि भाई मुझे बस जितना काम मिनिमम कर दें ताकि मेरा पीएचडी निकल जाए, एंड वंस द पीएचडी इज डन देन द स्टूडेंट डज नॉट केयर अबाउट दैट प्रोजेक्ट एनी फर्दर. Similarly, once the paper is published probably, or the grant is completed, the professor also probably doesn't care about. So that's why the projects get born. They survive for some time or grow for some time, and after that they die. What happens when you create a equity based startup and run some projects, what happens is the equity remains in the company. The student feels like this is my product, this is my company, my project. So what I have found is all those, out of my 7 PhD students, I think 5 are co-founders. So at one time in my lab, I had more startups than the incubator of IIT Ropar. So
that's actually interesting.
So that way, what happens is after I have seen that once the student feels like this is their project, this is something if they do, then if this makes money or this goes in the market, they themselves should gain from it. then I have to do very little handholding. They themselves come and tell what is to be done next. They themselves go on, creating social media posts, how to engage, how to find right customers, how to, do marketing, sales, and so that way I find like it is a different way of doing research where the ownership is taken by the students. I also have the ownership, they also have the ownership, and then what happens is it becomes a little bit more collaborative, where we have, but then the dynamics also changes because the student also now feels like I am also a part owner of this. So he also does not say feel like okay he should be taking orders from me. So and then as a professor, what happens is you become accustomed, after a while to people just listening to you, especially in government setup. My work was 50% of time. It was just like okay, go ahead, yes, do it, or sign this
And
paper.
now your students are telling you to do this.
Or let's have a meeting and other things like that. So that dynamics is still there, because there is of course there is a big experience gap which is there, and um, I feel like that may not completely go away ever, because that difference will always be there in terms of experience and but yeah, what happens is many times when a person is young, they feel like okay, उन्हें कर ले दुनिया मुट्ठी में हमें सब आता है, and then and what happens is after a when I am when you are a little bit experienced and you are not accustomed to just keep telling people, I just tell once or twice, ठीक है आप try कर लो, many times what happens is you want to try yourself, fail and then learn, rather than there are two ways. In fact, I myself have suffered from this. Like you are told like by somebody who is experienced, like okay why are you doing this, why don't you do this other way, and then you feel like नहीं क्या बोल रहे हैं उनको क्या पता होगा, आई विल ट्राई, वो उनके टाइम में नहीं होता था, हमारे अभी तो दुनिया डिफरेंट है. And what happens is you try that and after a while you realize yourself. So there are two ways of learning actually. One is by खुद गिर के करो, दूसरा है इस तरह से एक्सपीरियंस. आई वॉज एक्चुअली इसमें एक कॉन्सेप्ट है हमारे इंडियन ट्रेडिशन में, श्रद्धा. श्रद्धा होता है ना, गुरु के प्रति एक श्रद्धा जिनकी होती है, वो जब वो उस ट्रेडिशन से बना हुआ था कि गुरु गुरु बोल रहे हैं या कोई बोल रहा है हमसे ऊपर, तो उस श्रद्धा के बेसिस पे उसको ले लिया. ही इज नॉट, अगर आर्ग्यू करके उसको समझा नहीं सकते उस चीज को, वो श्रद्धा के बेसिस पे ले लिया कि भाई ऐसा होता है तुम मान, अगर तुम मान के चले गए तो हो सकता है यू माइट बी सेव्ड फ्रॉम सर्टन थिंग्स. बट ठीक है, अभी करंटली एक दूसरा तरीका है कि ठीक है यू शुड एक्सप्लोर द वर्ल्ड, यू शुड फाइंड आवरसेल्व्स, which is a logical way. Many times you want to see yourself, current explanation, you want to be explained why somebody is telling something like that. That is also another direction.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So now, when you started off, right, how did you figure out that because you were making a startup, talking about Magnimus, right? It's an AR/VR startup. So you were teaching something else. Your startup is in some other vertical. How did you, bridge the gap between the both?
Actually, the Magnimus, the way it started is I got a somebody from name Abhinav, who is the co-founder of Magnimus. So during peak COVID time, he contacted me. He looked at my website. He was doing his master's in biosciences or biosciences department in IIT Kanpur. So he was about to complete that. So that time he wanted to build a startup. So he had some idea of some hardware product for neonatology. And so he's looked at some medical device research, which professors are doing that. So then he contacted me at that time. And I told, ठीक है, you can probably, if you, I just, when he contacted, I was not, I wanted to see his seriousness. So I told, ठीक है, अगर आपको इंटरेस्ट है आ जाओ कभी, एक हफ्ता यहाँ रुक जाओ, and then we'll discuss and explore. So then he came came, and then we discussed, and then I found him that he wanted to seriously do this. But then, because I knew that space, the product which he first came up with, that this is what he wanted to do, I told कि इसमें बहुत competition है. There is already a lot of big companies, big players in this. I don't think this product will sell. We'll have to explore other ideas. So then we brainstormed for many days, and at that time what had happened is in COVID I was COVID में सबको घर में बैठे हुए. Now you see I probably look thin and slim. At that time I was little what to say, bulky, and I had contracted. I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes at that time. And when it came at that time, I was actually working out a lot. Means I was walking every day for for couple of hours every day. And so I realized that there is, it is why people don't work out, even if they know that it is important for them. So can we make it interesting in some ways? Can we make it, and again, how can we have people work out at home? Because I even had a treadmill for many years before I had, pre-diabetes at that time. And that treadmill was not used because I found that when I started working out, I started walking around, uh, in Ropar, I just would walk on the roads for hours, 1 or 2 hours. And I realized that I can actually walk for much longer if I am walking in the open rather than if I try to do the same thing on treadmill. I find I become very bored very quickly. Within 5-10 minutes, you feel like okay, bahut ho gaya. Then that's the concept which you took up, and we started thinking of how can we make this interesting. And then this idea that can we do it in build something in VR AR. And at that time I was working for my seizure detection project, the epilepsy project. I was working on posture detection to detect if the person is having seizure like motion. So posture detection using AI algorithms. So then we thought, can we take the same concept and then detect what activity or what exercise the person is doing in front of a camera, and then run some virtual games on computers. And there's where this idea started springing up. And at that time, we in fact started learning Unity, which is the game development platform. At that time, we started exploring Unity, and Abhinav started learning. I also started learning a little bit. There was Mohit, who is another co-founder. He actually was working on another project, but he started working parallelly in this, and he became very good at Unity. Now he's our chief game officer, we call him. He is very good at Unity, and he leads the about 10 members here who are developing different aspects of game development. Yeah. Yeah, that is the Magnus story. Means from the Magnus we actually went, because I already had a little bit experience before building Magnus with Epilepto. Uh, because in Epilepto we started off just as a project which was given as a grant for seizure detection in epilepsy. Although that is a very interesting project, we did a very complex hardware development in that. We developed a 6-layer PCB of a smartwatch completely made in India. So, which is, I don't think in India, very few labs would have this kind of capability who would be able to develop 6-layer PCB with probably 10 different sensors on it, with a display, with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, everything built into one PCB. I would have that here somewhere. I'll show you. So that project, then we put a lot of effort in building a smartwatch, in fact. But then towards recently what we have done is, now that project is over, but now we are feeling like building hardware and actually translating it as a small startup is very difficult. You require very deep pockets to actually scale it, because what happens is software startups, and in fact I would many faculty members do not understand it. And they say that okay, computer science, core engineering, वो सब करो, ठीक है, that is essential. But if you want to build a startup and you don't have a lot of money, then going the software way is the right way in the beginning. Build something because what happens is, if there you can build something which is a small team, and scaling it is not that expensive, and the expenses mount only with scale. You don't have to do upfront investment to get to the scale. While in hardware startups, it is very different. Even if I have a smartwatch design, I have to first probably get a order, and to fulfill that order, I'll have to first, what to say, manufacture 10,000, 100,000 pieces, which might cost me few crores before even the money starts coming in. So that's why doing a hardware startup is very difficult. And it is coming from someone who has been doing hardware for over 10 years now. Uh, so and it is very close to my heart. It is very. I told you that why I left software engineering to come to hardware, because I wanted to do that. And now, after doing all these years, now I feel like uh, software, especially in India, what happens is you have a lot of our services sector is much more developed than our manufacturing. We don't. China has already taken the bus 10 years back. So even for our smartwatch design, we had to for the manufacturing we had to depend on China, because the way they can do with the speed and with the precision, that is difficult to achieve in some parts. We have say in Gujarat, we have PCB Power. They are doing good PCB design work, but some very low tolerances you still have to depend on China.